everyone says you should never study the night before an exam. You should start early, you should revise every day, but sometimes, life just happens. Sometimes you have hospital rotations, sometimes you are tired, sometimes you procrastinate, sometimes you open the book and realize the exam is tomorrow, and your brain is like, what should we do now? And honestly, I have studied the night before exams more times than I want to admit. Not because I think it's the perfect method, because it's not, and not because I recommend destroying your sleep or nervous system. I don't, but because sometimes the night before an exam is the time when everything feels, real. Suddenly you stop trying to make beautiful notes, you stop pretending you need a perfect study plan, and you actually study. So today I want to talk about something really controversial. Maybe studying the night before an exam actually works, but only if you do it correctly. And by correctly, I don't mean reading the whole textbook in one night, because that's not studying, that's psychological thriller. I mean using the exam itself to guide you, doing questions, finding exactly what you don't know, reading only the 1 or 2 paragraphs that explain the exact thing, and asking the right people what really matters. Also, in the last hours, scanning headings and subheadings so your brain remembers what belongs where. Because the night before exam, you don't have time to study everything, you have time to actually stop bleeding. Okay, first of all, before anyone attacks me, I need to say this clearly. I'm not saying don't study during the semester, I'm not saying panic is a healthy productivity system. Obviously, studying during the semester is better, spaced repetition is better, sleeping properly before an exam is important, but this video is not for the imaginary perfect student who started revising 3 weeks ago. This video is for the student who is sitting there the night before the exam thinking, okay, I have limited time, I don't know much, and what now? Because when you're already in that position, advice like, you should have started earlier is basically useless. Like, thank you, I will now travel back in time. So instead of judging ourselves, let's talk about how to make the night before exam study session work. Not perfectly, obviously, not aesthetically, but effectively. Okay, before I explain exactly how I do it, I want to say something really interesting. This method is not completely random. The main idea is called test, gap, tiny reading, and retest. There's actually a concept in learning science that supports part of this, and it is called the testing effect. One famous study in 2006 was called test-enhanced learning. Taking memory tests improves long-term retention. The basic idea is that testing yourself is not just a way to check what you know. Testing yourself can actually help you learn and remember better. So when I say I start with a test, I'm not just trying to torture myself. I mean, maybe a little, but that makes sense. A test shows you what you know, what you don't know, what you only think you know, and what your brain is pretending to know because it recognized the words on the page. There's also a big review from 2013 called Improving Students' Learning by Effective Learning Techniques. And one of the strongest techniques they discussed was practice testing. Not rereading, not highlighting everything, not making perfect notes. Practice testing. And another study in 2008 looked at feedback after testing, and this is very close to what I do. You test yourself, you see what you got wrong or what you were unsure about, and the feedback after testing helps you correct that gap. So the science is simple. Testing helps you learn, feedback helps you correct mistakes, and for me, the fastest way to use both is to test myself, find the gap, reading the exact missing part, and then test again. Now let me explain how I actually do it. The weird thing is studying the night before can sometimes feel more effective than studying earlier, and I think the main reason is urgency. When the exam is far away, my brain thinks everything is important equally. I want to understand the whole textbook, I want to make perfect notes, I want to summarize everything, and I know you are just like me, and I want to maybe create a study plan that I will abandon after one day. But the night before exam, There is no time for aesthetic productivity. You become more practical. You start asking better questions like, what is high yield? What do professors love asking? And what can I fix tonight? Also, panic removes perfectionism. I don't care if my handwriting is ugly. I don't care if my notes are chaotic. I just care about answering questions and surviving. And sometimes that survival mode is more productive than fake calm productivity, like, let's study with me for 30 hours. That's what I do, but okay. But there's a very important problem. Studying the night before only works if you have some background. If you attended classes, if you listened to lectures, read some parts before, or at least know the general structure of the subject, then the night before can be a really powerful revision session. But if you know absolutely nothing, then the night before is not studying, it is grief. You are not revising, you are meeting the subject for the first time, and the subject is not friendly. So rule number 1 is to be honest about your level. Are you revising or are you studying everything for the first time? If you are revising, then congratulations, the night before can work. And if you are starting from zero, you can still improve your score, but you need to be very strategic. You cannot open chapter 1 and pretend you're about to become an expert by sunrise. You need a system, and for me, the system starts with questions. The most important thing that works for me is starting with a test, not because I expect myself to know the answers. Actually, the point is the opposite. I do the test to expose what I don't know, because when you only read, you can fool yourself. Like, you read a paragraph and you think, yeah, I know this, but then the question comes and suddenly your brain is empty. So I start with questions. I do a test, past questions, sample questions, or anything close to the exam style, and then I look carefully at what I got wrong. But here is the important part. When I realize I don't know a topic, I do not go and read the whole chapter, because this is how you lose 3 hours and still feel behind. Instead, I go directly to the exact 1 or 2 paragraphs that explain the thing I missed. That's it. If the question is about one complication, I don't read the whole disease again, from definition to epidemiology to pathophysiology to treatment. I read the part about that complication. This is so important, because the night before the exam, you are not trying to become a textbook. You are trying to close the gaps that are more likely to cost you marks. So the method is do a test, find the gap, read only the paragraph that fills that gap, go back to questions. Because the danger of the night before the exam is not just knowing too little. It is wasting your time trying to know too much. Your mistakes are not proof that you're stupid. They are instructions, and they are telling you what to study next. Another thing that actually works for me is asking a trusted nerd friend. Sorry, Edge, I have to do this. But seriously, this works. Sometimes when I'm too overwhelmed, I cannot decide what is important anymore. Everything looks important, every chapter looks dangerous, so I ask someone I trust, usually someone who has studied more than me or someone who has a better sense of the exam. And I ask, what are the 10 topics you think are the most important? Not 50 topics, not the whole syllabus, just 10, because at that point I don't need someone to give me more panic, I need someone to help me choose. Then I go and review those topics. Of course, you should not blindly depend on someone else, because they can be wrong too. They are still just a student, probably tired, probably also traumatized by the syllabus, but sometimes a trusted friend can see the exam more clearly than your panicked brain. And honestly, if you have a nerd friend who can give you a clean list of the most important topics, appreciate them. They're our treasure. Itch? Another thing that helps is making a mistake list. Not beautiful notes, a mistake list. Every time I get something wrong, I write it in a very short way. For example, forgot first line management, topic loved by the professor, or emergency management. This list becomes my final review, because before the exam, I don't want to reread everything. I just want to reread the things that actually cause problems. Okay, this one is my favorite, and it works very well in the last hours before the exam. And it is, looking only at headings and subheadings, not reading the whole topic again, just looking at headings and subheadings. This works especially well when you have already studied before, because sometimes you know the information but you forget what it is related to. You know the details but you forget the category, and this is exactly the kind of thing that can be missed in the exam. Simple things, things that are literally in front of everyone's eyes, but because they are too obvious, you miss them. So in the last hours, I go through the topics very quickly and I only look at headings, subheadings, and bold words because I don't want to miss the obvious ones, and I notice. So I notice and I win. Now the painful part. Sleep. I know, I hate this advice too, but you need some sleep. Even if you cannot sleep 8 hours, try to sleep at least a little, because if you study all night and enter the exam with a dead brain, you may forget everything you actually knew. And that's it. Maybe studying the night before an exam actually works. So if you're watching this video the night before your exam, first of all, I'm sorry, I don't have any exam tomorrow. Second of all, close YouTube after this video, then do a test, find the gap, read the paragraph, ask the nerd friend, look at headings and subheadings, get some sleep, and please drink water. Good luck with your exam. Love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!